He's lying flat on his back in total darkness, camera raised toward a ceiling barely 2 feet above his face. This is 19th Unnamed Cave, Alabama, the richest dark zone art site in the southeastern United States. Hundreds of images cover this low ceiling, drawn in mud by hands that vanished centuries ago. But here's the problem. Cavers photographed this exact spot for over 20 years and missed what was actually there. Hidden in the stone was a serpent nearly 11 feet long, invisible to the naked eye, carved by someone who could never see it finished, which shouldn't be possible. For decades, nobody thought caves like this existed at all. Prehistoric cave art was supposed to belong to France, to Spain, to the painted caverns of Lascaux and Altamira. In America, if you wanted monumental ancient art, you looked west, to canyon walls in the desert southwest, to petroglyphs baking under open sky. The wet, dark limestone caves of the southeast weren't part of that story. Nobody was looking for masterpieces underground in Alabama and Tennessee. Then, in 1979, cavers found a bird etched into a Tennessee cave wall, and the entire assumption cracked open. That site became known as Mudglyph Cave. It proved something researchers hadn't considered, that native peoples had crawled into absolute darkness centuries before European contact and left deliberate symbolic art on cave ceilings no sunlight ever touched. That discovery didn't just add one site to the map. It opened a door researchers didn't know existed, and they have been walking through it ever since. Over the following decades, teams combed limestone caverns across the region, checking ceilings and passage walls that cavers had walked past for generations without a second look. Most sites turned up a handful of figures, a scattering of lines, a single animal etched near an entrance. The 19th Unnamed Cave broke that pattern completely. Hundreds of images packed into one ceiling, more concentrated symbolic art than any comparable site in the region has ever produced. If Mudglyph Cave proved the tradition existed, the 19th Unnamed Cave proved nobody understood how far it went. 19th Unnamed Cave is the next chapter in that story, and by the numbers, it's the biggest one. Researchers now call it the richest dark zone art site known anywhere in the Southeast. Hundreds of individual images, serpents, birds, insects, human figures wrapped in ceremonial regalia, cover a ceiling that in places drops to barely half a meter above the floor. That's not a comfortable studio. That's a space where an artist had to lie flat, breathe shallow, and work by torchlight, in a position closer to a crawl space than a canvas. For comparison, the famous rock art of the American Southwest sits in open canyons under daylight, where anyone with a horse and a guide can ride out and see it. This is the opposite kind of monument. No sunlight has ever touched these images. No visitor center points the way. Every figure on this ceiling was made for an audience of almost no one, maybe a handful of people across centuries, maybe none at all after the torches went out. That's a strange kind of fame. Prestigious enough to be called the richest site of its kind in the region, and hidden enough that most of it wasn't even visible to the people who made it. Here's where it gets strange. This cave wasn't found last year. A caver and photographer named Alan Kressler first spotted the mudglyphs back in 1998, after searching for years on a hunch that something was hiding in that ceiling. He and archaeologist Jan Simic published the first description the following year. For 2 decades after that, researchers photographed, sketched, and studied that ceiling using standard methods. And for 2 decades, they missed the largest figures entirely. Not because the art wasn't there, because no human being standing or crawling inside that cave has ever had a vantage point to see it. The ceiling is too low, the chamber too tight. Nobody, not the ancient artist, not the modern researcher, could ever look at the full composition with their own eyes. That single detail should stop you. Somebody made something they could never see finished, and for over 1,000 years, neither could anyone else. To understand why anyone would go this deep into total darkness in the first place, you have to understand the region itself. This stretch of northern Alabama sits along the Tennessee River in a landscape riddled with limestone caves and rock shelters that pull people back again and again across thousands of years. Not far from 19th Unnamed Cave in Lauderdale County sits Dust Cave, a completely different site, from a completely different era, but it proves something critical about this exact landscape. When archaeologist Boyce Driscoll and his team began excavating Dust Cave in 1989, they uncovered over 4 meters of layered deposits and pulled more than 40 radiocarbon dates from the ground. Those dates span roughly 10,600 years ago to around 3600 BCE, late Paleo-Indian hunters through Middle Archaic communities, one stratum stacked on another like pages in a buried book. Stone points change style with each layer. Quad and Beaver Lake forms near the bottom, giving way to Kirk-stemmed, then Eva and Morrow Mountain traditions higher up. Human burials, a dog burial, a cache of goose bones, tools, food remains, layer after layer of ordinary daily survival, preserved in exceptional detail by the cave's dry, stable conditions. That's the part that matters here. Long before anyone crawled into 19th Unnamed Cave to draw a serpent on a ceiling, this region had already been continuously inhabited for thousands of years. People never left. Generation after generation returned to these same bluffs, these same rivers, these same caves. Researchers studying Dust Cave's food remains even overturned an old assumption of their own, the long-standing image of Paleo-Indians as big game hunters chasing mammoths across the plains. What they found instead at Dust Cave was a far more flexible diet: migratory waterfowl, fish, nuts, berries, whatever the river valley offered season to season. Survival here wasn't about one dramatic hunt. It was about knowing the land intimately, generation after generation, and adapting to it. So when the glyph makers finally arrived at 19th Unnamed Cave, sometime in the woodland period, they weren't wandering into empty wilderness. They were stepping into a landscape already layered with memory, still humming with 10 millennia of use. And that raises the obvious question researchers still can't fully answer. Why did they choose this particular cave, this particular chamber, to leave something so labor-intensive that no one, including them, would ever see whole? Because here's the detail that should unsettle you. Unlike Dust Cave, the art chamber at 19th Unnamed Cave has produced no stone tools, no food waste, salt, no bones, nothing that says people lived here even briefly. Compare that to Dust Cave's thick, artifact-rich layers, packed with the debris of ordinary survival, and the silence in the art chamber gets louder. Whoever made this art came in, worked, and left almost nothing behind except the art itself. That's not what an abandoned or forgotten space looks like. That's what a space treated as too important for ordinary use looks like. Researchers can't even date the glyphs directly. Mud doesn't hold a radiocarbon signature the way charcoal does. All they have are fragments of burned river cane, torch material, and a handful of woodland period ceramic sherds scattered on the cave floor. That's it. That's the entire dating toolkit for one of the richest art sites in North America. And it points to 2 separate calibrated windows, roughly the 2nd to 4th centuries CE, and again around the 7th to 10th centuries CE. This means multiple generations of people, possibly centuries apart, kept returning to work on the same ceiling. One theory, and it's only a theory, says the chamber was never meant for the living at all. Caves in southeastern Indigenous belief functioned as passages into the underworld, and this ceiling was a kind of doorway, decorated for spirits rather than people. It's a compelling idea. It's also unprovable. What we do know is this: whoever came back, generation after generation, never brought their daily life with them. No cook fires, no trash, just torchlight, mud, and a plan. And that plan finally became visible in a laboratory, decades after Kressler first found the cave. In 2017, photographer Stephen Alvarez began a project that would take him nearly 2 months of work inside that chamber. Working flat on his back in a space too tight to lift his head, he shot almost 16,000 overlapping photographs of the ceiling, each one overlapping the last by 60 to 80%, a technique called photogrammetry. It's the same basic method used to map ancient cities from satellite imagery or reconstruct crime scenes for a courtroom, just aimed at a slab of cave ceiling instead of a landscape. Feed that many overlapping images into modeling software and it doesn't just create a picture. It builds a manipulable, three-dimensional digital twin of the entire ceiling, one you can rotate, strip apart, and relight from angles no human body could ever physically occupy inside that cave. That's exactly what Alvarez, Kressler, and Samick did next. They digitally removed the cave floor from the model. They relit the stone from new angles the torch-bearing artist himself never had. And that's when 5 massive figures appeared fully for the first time since they were made. One anthropomorphic figure in ceremonial regalia measured just under a meter. 2 more wearing what looks like elaborate headdress and body ornament measured 1.81 and 2.08 meters, taller than the person who carved them, in a room where that same person could never have stood up straight to check the proportions. A swirling figure with what may be a serpent's tail stretched over 2 meters wide. And at the center of it all, curling along a natural crack in the limestone as if the rock itself had been waiting for it, a diamond-patterned serpent, very likely modeled on an eastern diamondback rattlesnake, stretching 337 centimeters from head to tail, 11 feet of stone-carved serpent, invisible in person, revealed only by software. Researchers published the full findings in the journal Antiquity in 2022, and the line that should stop you is buried right there in the paper. Before photogrammetry, the presence of figures this large in the American Southeast was, in their words, unknown and unsuspected, not disputed, not underestimated, unsuspected. Nobody knew to look for something like this because nobody imagined it was possible. Other archaeologists who reviewed the work called it exemplary. One researcher pointed out that 40 years ago, almost nobody would have believed the Southeast held cave art at all, let alone art on this scale. Another asked the question that still hangs over the whole discovery: who were these artists in their own communities? And what gave them the authority or the obligation to create something this large in a place almost no one would ever enter again? Nobody has a confirmed answer, but the skill required is no longer in dispute. And here's where the story turns. This isn't just a bigger drawing than anyone expected. It's proof of something much stranger, an artist working entirely from memory and imagination, planning a composition they would never verify with their own eyes. No test sketch, no stepping back to check proportions. Every curve of that serpent had to be held complete in someone's mind before a single line touched the mud. That's not primitive art. That's advanced spatial planning executed blind, centuries before anyone in the Southeast is typically credited with that kind of sophistication. But the reversal cuts both ways, because proving the art is more advanced than assumed doesn't answer who made it or why. Jan Simic has been careful to say the anthropomorphic figures don't match any known Southeastern myth or recorded oral tradition. They're not identifiable characters. They might represent spirits materializing through ceremonial dress. They might represent something else entirely. The scan solved the mystery of scale. It did nothing to solve the mystery of meaning. That mystery now extends beyond the research team. The Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians has been consulted on this and related cave art discoveries in the region, and their tribal historic preservation staff have worked directly with Simic on similar sites nearby. Even with that consultation, the figures remain unidentified in Cherokee ethnographic memory. As Simic himself has put it, the archaeology here is part of a continuum still alive today. The descendants of these people are not a footnote in a research paper. They're a living, ongoing part of the question. And that question collides directly with a modern conflict most viewers never think about. The exact location of 19th unnamed cave has never been published, not in the news coverage, not in the peer-reviewed paper itself. Researchers deliberately withhold it because the mud glyphs are almost unbelievably fragile. A single careless hand, a helmet brushing the ceiling, could destroy in a second what survived over 1,000 years of total darkness. Mud doesn't restore the way stone does. Once it's touched, once it dries wrong or crumbles, there's no second scan that brings it back. That secrecy protects the art. It also means the public will likely never see the real location, never verify it independently, never stand where that artist once lay on their back in the dark. Journalists who want to visit are turned away. Even some academic colleagues outside the research team have limited access. Preservation and transparency are pulling in opposite directions, and there is no clean answer for which one should win. Zoom out, and the story gets even bigger. Researchers have now cataloged more than 90 dark zone cave art sites across 6 states: Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, Kentucky, Virginia, West Virginia, a hidden tradition that barely existed in the scientific record before 1979. Not far from 19th unnamed cave, at a site called Manitou Cave, the same research team documented something just as unsettling in its own way. Cherokee syllabary writing scratched into the walls in the 1820s, a reminder that these caves were still being used, still meant something, right up until the edge of written history. A nonprofit called the Ancient Art Archive now works to document sites like these before erosion, vandalism, or simple time erased them for good. Every one of those sites quietly argues the same point. 19th unnamed cave makes louder than any of them. Monumental, prehistoric art was not a southwestern specialty. It was happening underground, in the dark, in Alabama and Tennessee, centuries before anyone was documenting it. The old assumption that the Southeast was archaeologically quiet compared to the desert Southwest is getting harder to defend with every new cave that gets scanned. None of this fully closes the case. We know how the art was made, roughly when, and by a culture connected to communities still living today. We do not know who the figures represent. We do not know exactly why this particular chamber, empty of tools and food and daily life, was chosen for something this labor-intensive. We do not know how many more ceilings like this one are still sitting in the dark, unscanned, waiting for a technology that has not been invented yet. And that last question is not small. Photogrammetry only exists as a practical field tool because of relatively recent advances in cameras and processing power. Every dark zone cave documented before that point was documented incompletely, by definition, checked by eye, by flashlight, by hand-drawn sketch, never by a method capable of seeing what the human eye physically cannot. If the richest known site in the region hid its largest figures for over 20 years of direct study, the honest question is not whether other caves are holding similar secrets, it is how many and for how much longer. Somewhere in northern Alabama tonight, that low ceiling is still there. Torchlight gone, mud glyphs sitting exactly as they've sat for over 1,000 years. Sealed in a darkness no flashlight has fully mapped and no map will ever mark. A serpent 11 feet long, curling along a crack in the limestone, waiting in absolute blackness for eyes that for most of its existence could never quite find it. Researchers know it's there. A camera has finally seen it whole, but the ground above it looks like any other Alabama hillside, quiet, unremarkable, giving nothing away. Somewhere under that quiet ground, the serpent is still curling toward a tail no one has ever fully traced. The cave is still out there. Most people will never know exactly where.